Good morning, class. Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me loud and clear without any breaks? Please type in the message if you're able to hear me without any breaks. Maybe takes time.
नहीं, they are sending yes sir.
नहीं वो ठीक है, बट जो ट्रांसमिशन में है ना डिले रहता है, ट्रांसमिशन डिले होता है ना. So your pediatrics class will start at 11 o'clock, not as per schedule. There was a slight change in the schedule at the very last minute. Sorry for the inconvenience. So we'll move on to the class. We have this medicine lecture. We started with asthma in the last lecture, and breaks present. I understand there is a certain amount of glitches in audio, and which we have tried to work out, but of no avail. Are you able to hear me out loud and clear without any breaks right now? Yes, no sir. Okay, I think you should have gone through the PPT. I shared the PPT with one of the guys. I think you must have the PPT. You can see the PPTs, and I'll speak slowly and frugally. Very good. So we talked about asthma in the last class, and as we talked about asthma, as you all know, it's a chronic inflammation which is associated with the airway hyperresponsiveness. And the two main important things to look for in asthma is bronchoconstriction and airway hyperresponsiveness. We talked about the genetic environmental interaction and susceptibility. How's basically asthma is, it can be you can use it as an analogy for allergic bronchitis. So that's not the same as allergic bronchitis. Please note it down. So as we said, the asthma it's a result of gene environmental interaction. There is basically gene susceptibility, and along with environmental triggers, as we talked about all the indoor and outdoor allergens, smoking, sulfur dioxide, firecrackers, environmental tobacco, smoke, pollutants, car pollutants, even indoor house mites, cockroaches, dust, and then the socioeconomic crowding and all that kind of status, obesity, respiratory illnesses. So these all are known risk factors. Then we talked about how the disease progress, how the asthma, first of all, you have the patient with the risk, then there is a disease induction. As we talked about, it's an IgA mediated type 1 type of reaction, and once the disease process it starts, then it translates into disease consolidation, and then it keeps progressing, and it has a very variable presentation. Then as we showed in the slide, you have the allergen, and then you have the dendritic cells which binds to the allergen. Then it goes and stimulate T helper cells, and normally there is a preponderance of Th1 cells in the lungs, but in cases of asthmatic patients, you will find that there will be preponderance of type 2 helper cells, and they will invariably go and induce secretion of certain cytokines, as you can see, IL-13, IL-4, IL-5, IL-5, and granulocyte, monocyte colony stimulating factors, and they will induce production of B cells, and then B cells are the plasma cells which will invariably produce antibody, which is IgE antibody, and then the IL-4, IL-5 will induce mast cells, and IL-5 will induce eosinophils. Then they have their own plethora of ammunitions in the form of leukotrienes, prostaglandins, which goes and promotes further inflammation. What happens on the structural level? You will find a smooth muscle, there will be enlargement of smooth muscle, there will be more tendency or smooth muscle to bronchoconstrict, uh, uh, goes into spasm, and then you have vascular leaks. It's increase in cell permeability and increase in vascular permeability. Then as there is more chemotaxis of neutrophils and macrophages, then will be more cell infiltration will take place, and there will be increased mucus secretion and goblet cell secretion. Then definitely all these cytokines, leukotrienes they're gonna spread the inflammation to greater extent. And then there you have something called bronchoconstriction, which is being induced by vagal response, the vagal receptor, which is present subepithelially. So this is how the structure looks like, the airway looks like during an asthmatic attack. Then we talked about the differences of COPD and asthma. The next topic will be COPD. When we come to COPD, you will again, there will be some kind of a recapture of what we talked about in asthma. Then as the presentation, as I told you, the asthma, the peak of presentation is usually in the childhood, and usually by 3 to 5 years of age it manifests in children. And even there are certain cases where you have the asthma manifestation later in the life, in the adolescent and in adulthood, but mostly it's a childhood disease. Then you will have breathlessness, chest tightness, nocturnal cough, early morning breathlessness or early morning cough, diurnal and seasonal variations, and there is history of atopy or a family history. And atopy, as I told you, you have two main kinds of asthma, atopic and non-atopy, and most of the cases of asthma, they fall under the atopic classification, where you will have systemic IgE mediated response to any allergens, and non-atopic is basically a local IgE mediated response, and usually there is an association of aspirin and nasal polyps along with this non-atopic asthma. The atopic asthma, because it is something like a predisposition to allergic conditions, so patient usually might present with any one of the 4 features along with asthma, that is rhinitis, eczema or migraine. Then differential diagnosis we talked about. Then typical history, because asthma is very common. It's very common, one of the very commonest disease you will come across in your clinics. You will come across all over India, and usually it present as intermittent symptoms. Intermittent symptoms means it has a variation. It comes and goes. It doesn't stay for a constant. There is a persistent inflammation, but the symptoms it varies. There is a normalcy in between these symptoms. There is a period of patient doing his normal activities in between these symptoms, and as I said, there is the association of symptoms to all these allergens, and all these triggers are there, and it has a tendency to precipitate more in the early morning or the late night. That is a seasonal variation is there, and this is the routine investigation, the hemogram, where you find increase in eosinophil count. Then you will have blood gas analysis. When asthma is very severe, you might find decrease in SpO2, this is oxygen saturation, and there might be normocapnia or hypercapnia, this is increase in carbon dioxide level. XRHS is not very significant in cases of asthma. XRHS is more related in cases of COPD, and serum electrolytes are routine tests. You can have a association of asthma with hypomagnesemia, so, or maybe because from treatment point of view, in acute exacerbation of asthma, we do tend to give magnesium sulfate IV. So that's why serum electrolyte should be checked before starting on the treatment. Then the spirometry, as we talked about, spirometry apart from the clinical diagnosis is very important, and the spirometry is one of the supplementary tests. And the spirometry, what you get to see in cases of asthma. And one important thing is, since it's a variable disease, it has a very variable, and it comes in WIMS. So you might have a normal spirometry in between the exacerbations, so that doesn't rule out asthma. And as for diagnosis from spirometry point of view is like demonstration of airway obstruction and reversibility on inhalation on a bronchodilator. Inhalation of a bronchodilator, there might be greater than 12% increase in FEV2 or 200 ml increase in FEV1. Then we talked about limitation of now goals of asthma therapy. Now we coming on to the goals of asthma therapy. We basically have 4 goals. First and foremost is to prevent recurrent exacerbation and minimize the need for emergency department visits or hospitalization. That's what goes for any disease. We should always cut down on the curb down the severity of the disease so that the patient does not land up in emergency department. Second is to maintain normal pulmonary function and then normal activity levels. The patient should have a totally unfettered normal activities, is not restricted in his normal routine activities or in his normal work. Then we'd also have to provide a very optimal pharmacotherapy so that the side effects should be very minimal. So this is a very important chart. As I have shared these slides with you, you can note it down. This is basically the crux, or you would say this is the whole summarize of the asthma classification as well as treatment. So whenever you find a case of asthma or you suspect a case of asthma, you need to classify first, and the classification of asthma severity is basically, it runs into 4 types. First is intermittent, second one is mild persistent, third is moderate persistent, and fourth one is severe persistent. So what is a common denominator in all these 3, mild, moderate and severe, is the persistent. That is, the patient has the process has gone into the consolidation phase. So where we will have persistent asthma, the patient will have persistent symptoms as the word suggests. So what happens in intermittent, when you classify intermittent, the symptoms will be basically the daytime symptoms will be less than or up to 2 days per week. There will be nocturnal awakening maybe up to 2 or less than 2 per month, and short acting beta 2 agonists use will be used up in number of 2 days or less than 2 days in a week to relieve of the symptoms. And interference with normal activity won't be present, it will be absolutely normal, and lung functions will be absolutely normal. This is how the intermittent, these are the 5 criterias, and even the lung function is one criteria you can do away with, because clinically if you have to analyze, this first 4 is very important. To question any patient coming, or you are suspecting asthma and they are coming up with a typical symptom of asthma, then first 4 is very important for classification of asthma severity. Then the mild persistent is those who present with daytime symptoms more than 2 days a week, but not daily. Nocturnal awakening 3 to 4 times in a month, and where you're using beta 2 or short acting reliever drugs more than 2 days a week. And as far as normal activity is concerned, there will be minimal or a very minute limitations. Lung function will be absolutely normal. Now comes to the moderate. Persistent asthma, you will have symptoms daily, Every day they will come with symptoms, and nocturnal awakening will be more than once a week, and use of obviously the use of a reliever drug, that is short acting beta 2 agonist, will be daily, and interference with normal activity will be definitely, there will be some limitations, some amount of limitations in normal activities. And lung function, if you do the lung function, you will find FEV1 is greater than 60% but less than 80%, and FEV1 FEVC is also reduced. Now come to the severe persistent. You will have the symptom throughout the day. You will have symptom more than once or twice in a day, and nocturnal awakening every single day in a week, and short acting agonist several times per day. Interference with normal activity will be extreme. The patient will be breathless on even a mild activity. So there might be instances when the patient is breathless at rest. Lung function will FEV1 will be less than 60%. FEV1 upon FVC will be reduced. And there is another classification, that is exacerbation, which requires oral systemic. We'll talk about acute exacerbation in the later slides. And the treatment modalities, again, it has been ramified into step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 or 5. We'll talk about it later. Just a minute, I'll see if you're able to hear me. Okay, I hope you are hearing me. So this is the basically a stepwise treatment. Again, this is another important slides which you should memorize, which is very important from your examination point of view and even treatment point of view. In cases of intermittent asthma, which considers step 1, where we use short acting beta agonist, and that is use SOS, that is when and as required. So it is not used in any particular schedule as such. It is used when and required. Nothing else is required. Step 2 is when you use low dose corticosteroid, which is being used in cases of might be used in cases of mild persistent asthma, where you can use low dose corticosteroid, that is inhalation corticosteroid, and that can be put on a daily dose, that can be put on a daily schedule. Or there can be, if the patient is not very receptive to intracorticosteroid, inhalation corticosteroid, then we can use other drugs. Alternatives are cromolins, theophylline, leukotriene receptor, like leukotriene receptors like montelukast and all. Step 3 is again for moderate, mild to moderate or moderate persistent asthma, where step 3 is basically where you use low dose inhalation corticosteroid along with long acting beta agonist, or you can use just a medium dose corticosteroid. Then you can have an alternative like low dose corticosteroid along with either leukotriene inhibitors or theophylline or xylotins. Step 4 is again a medium dose corticosteroid with long acting beta agonist. Sorry, there was a certain glitch. The system this lazy system went into sleep mode. Something which is very common during this lockdown period. So we are back. We were talking about the treatment. So you have to remember this chart, and you will definitely this thing will consolidate in your memory once we come for the clinicals, or subsequently when we talk about the asthma and asthma related symptoms and treatment. So we were talking about the step 4, and step 5 is like we use a high dose intracortical. So what is very important to note down is basically the corticosteroid inhalation dose is basically getting altered from step 3. Step 3 is like you can use single low dose intracorticosteroid plus LABA or a medium dose corticosteroid. But on step 4 you have to do medium dose inhalation corticosteroid plus LABA. And these are alternative treatment as well. Step 5 you go in full throttle. Full throttle means this is the maximum dose of steroid which you can instill along with LABA, and then you might have to consider adding omalizumab, which is anti-IgE antibody, which is anti-IgE antibody drug, which acts omalizumab, which acts on the IgE antibodies. So that especially for the patients who have significant allergies, who have positive allergic history. And then step 6 is again the preferred treatment is when you have to use a very high dose intracorticosteroid plus LABA, and there one important thing is you have to add an oral corticosteroid. Now, along with the inhalation corticosteroid you have to add oral corticosteroid. That is the step 6. Omalizumab is anti-IgE drug which is only used when there is a positive history of the allergy and we have a increased IgA level. So you have to be very careful about that. Basically, that we'll come back to the chart. First we'll talk about the asthma drug classification. So basically the classification falls in two types of drugs. One is relievers and other is controllers. The relievers are those which are being used as so as when and as required, as in cases of intermittent asthma or any case of asthma when the patient is not controlled. Basically you will need to add on relievers, and in relievers what it does it's why it's called reliever, because it offer a quick relief of symptoms and it is used in acute attack. And you have short acting beta agonist, short acting based, just a minute, just 1 minute. Hello. हाँ मैं क्लास ले रहा हूँ, मैं कॉल बैक, ठीक है, ऑनलाइन हूँ. So relievers, so relievers you have short acting beta 2 agonist. So what it does, it causes bronchodilation. So you have salbutamol, phenytoral and terbutaline, and there is another one is anticholinergic, which is ipratropium bromide. What is very important to know, the ipratropium bromide, which is anticholinergic, once we have seen the pathophysiology of asthma and we can see there is a bronchoconstriction and that is being relieved through the reliever through the use of short acting beta agonist. And there is also a cholinergic mechanism where is more cholinergic induce bronchoconstriction. So you can use anticholinergic as a reliever in place of short acting beta agonist, but anticholinergic is more useful in cases of COPD. Then coming on to the second one is controller. How does controller act? The controller does act by mitigating the inflammatory process which is going on, and it prevents and control further asthmatic attacks. And the patient on controller, they tend to do very well on controller drugs. So controller drugs is basically inhaled corticosteroid and long acting beta agonist. So inhaled corticosteroids you have beclomethasone, budesonide, fluticasone and cyclesonide. Very important to know is the budesonide and fluticasone, which is clinically used more pervasively, and they have pharmacokinetically they have a very good mechanism of safe and a good mechanism of action, and that is being favored drugs. Then in long acting beta agonists, salmeterol and formoterol both are being used, and the long acting beta agonist is being used as controller, It is not used as symptom reliever because it has a long T half, long duration of action, and onset of action is long. What is important to know, I would like to point out, this formoterol is a very precious drug because formoterol, it's a long acting beta agonist as well as it's a very fast acting beta agonist. So now there is something called smart treatment where you can use formoterol can be used as a reliever, and I'll come to this point later on. The formoterol along with low dose inhaled corticosteroid, it comes in combination, and you can get a combination of this formoterol and inhaled corticosteroid. Those meter dose inhalation, it's available in the market, and it can be used for relief of the symptom too.
स्लाइड नहीं दिख रहा है
स्लाइड नहीं दिख रहा है. It's very difficult to. So I hope you got your slides back. Are you able to see the slides? So you have controllers and relievers. So we are talking about formoterol. Formoterol is one beautiful long-acting beta agonist which has a fast onset of action, and that can be combined with low-dose corticosteroid, which is available in this combination is available as a meter dose inhaler in the market, and which can be used as a reliever, as we can use in intermittent asthma. Then you have leukotriene modifiers, montelukast and zafirlukast, which acts on the leukotrienes, and then oral corticosteroid as prednisolone, methylprednisolone, and then you have a sustained release theophylline preparation. Theophylline preparation has of late has gone out of favor because of it has a pro-arrhythmogenicity factor, and it has adverse effects. It has a very narrow window. Those window spectrum is very narrow, so its safety window spectrum is very narrow. So theophylline, if ever we have to use it, we should use it in a very low dose, because a high dose can leads to, especially in the cardiac patients, it is pro-arrhythmogenic. So if theophylline, if it has to be used, it should be used in a very low dose. So now relievers, as we talked about relievers, you have short-acting beta agonists, and you have anticholinergics, and you have salbutamol, phenytoral, terbutaline, and anticholinergic you have ipratropium bromide, the most favored anticholinergic which is used in asthma. And delivery of medication methods of medication delivery, as we talked about, we have several methods. We have meter dose inhalers, spacer, holding chamber, face mask, then you have a nebulizer machine, then you have oral medications, tablets, liquids. So these are you can use intravenous corticosteroid, you can use intravenous those theophylline. So you have myriads of methods of medication, but most favored is basically meter dose inhalation and nebulization. We're talking for the controllers, inhaled corticosteroid, which is a treatment of choice for a long-term control of persistent asthma, and its benefit, as you all know, it reduces airway inflammation, it decreases airway hyperresponsiveness, improves lung function and quality of lives, and reduce the frequency of exacerbation, and also reduce the use of quick relief medicine, that's relievers. Inhaled corticosteroid, you have beclomethasone, fluticasone, triamcinolone, budesonide, and flunisolide. And side effects, obviously the inhalational corticosteroid has a very typical side effects of dysphonia, cough, and throat irritation. It can cause oral thrush, which is oral candidiasis. That's why whenever you give an inhalation corticosteroid to the patients, you should always advise them uh, to do a warm mouth gargle after every puff of inhalation. Systemic inhalation, we know about the fluid retention, muscle weakness. It's predisposed to cataract. It predisposes to osteoporosis. It causes impaired wound healing. It is vomitogenic, and it can also cause glaucoma. And then long-acting controllers, long-acting beta-2 agonists, which is used as controllers, it can be used in combination with corticosteroid, and advantages are it blunt exercises induce symptoms for a long time, decreases nocturnal symptoms, improves quality of life. And the best one more was most important thing to note down is that beta-2 agonist long-acting should preferably never be used as a monotherapy. It should always be combined with inhaled corticosteroid because uh, it has been seen through several standardized controlled trials that it leads to mortality and significant mortality if used alone, and due to certain reasons. That's why long-acting beta-2 agonists should never be used alone. It should always be added to inhaled corticosteroid. And long-acting LABA is not used for acute symptom or exacerbation, except for we talked about formoterol, but that has to be combined with corticosteroid. So solo use is not long-acting LABA. Solo use is not advisable. So onset of action is 30 minutes and peak effect can be up to 12 hours. Useful beta-adrenergic effects. It relaxes bronchial smooth muscles, as you know. It inhibits mediator release also from the mast cells, eosinophils, macrophages. It decreases mucus secretion, increases mucociliary transport, inhibit cholinergic transmission, and decreases airway hyperresponses. Control leukotriene modifiers. You have montelukast and jafelukast. Montelukast can be used once a daily, and jafelukast can be used twice a daily. These all are additive. They don't tend to have they don't very potent for asthmatic patient, but they have especially for patients who are not favorable for corticosteroid therapy. These drugs can be tried on such patients. Then you have 5-lipoxygenase inhibitors like xalotin, which can be used 4 times daily. And the main problem with this is it has so many drug interactions that you have to be very careful while using this drug. Montelukast, it improves lung function and asthma control. It protects against the exercise-induced bronchoconstriction, and it is not as effective as inhaled corticosteroid, as I told you. And now the short-acting beta agonists, you have salbutamol, you have terbutaline, and you have levosalbutamol, and they are again the most effective medication for relief of acute bronchospasm, and they are basically used in patients with uncontrolled asthma as and when required. Again, it lowers effectiveness. It increases airway hyperresponsiveness. The side effects is increased heart rate, palpitation, tremors, very common, headache, sleeplessness, nervousness. So tremor is one thing is very common with it's one of the byproducts of use of beta-2 agonist. Unwanted side effects are hypokalemia and hyperglycemia and hypoxia because of the pulmonary vasodilation, causing increased ventilation and perfusion mismatch. Then you can use oral corticosteroid, and basically you should use it for a short course, and the dosing is 1 to 2 milligram per kg body weight, or you can use in the dose of 30 to 40 milligram for 10 to 14 days for acute exacerbation of asthma. And if it is used on a very short course, you don't need to wean off as typically you do in cases of corticosteroid. You wean off the doses, but it's not required in when you're using in a very short span of time. So Again, recap whatever we talked about as we went through the slides. Treatment for adults or children more than 5 years with mild with intermittent asthma, where you don't need controller, you will only need relievers, that is short acting beta 2 agonist. And if it is used more than twice a week, then you might need for a long term control therapy. If there is a mild persistent asthma, again you can use controller, low dose inhaled corticosteroid. Alternatives are leukotrienes modifiers. And for the relief of symptom, you have to again use either a short acting beta agonist, or we talk about formoterol plus low dose inhaled corticosteroid. Then for moderate persistent, you have to, as a controller, you have to use low to medium dose inhaled corticosteroid and long acting beta 2 agonist. You can use these inhalation as a separate canister, or you can use it they comes in combination also, which is present pervasively in the market. And there is an alternative is this increased inhaled corticosteroid to medium dose range can be used, or low to medium dose inhaled corticosteroid along with leukotriene modifier or theophylline. Then moderate persistent, again you have to use medium dose inhaled corticosteroid and long acting beta 2 agonist, and the alternative is medium dose inhaled corticosteroid and plus leukotriene modifier or theophylline, or high dose inhaled corticosteroid. For persistent, you have to use a high dose inhaled corticosteroid and long acting beta 2 agonist, and if needed you can add on leukotrienes antagonist plus theophylline, and even you can use oral corticosteroid tablets. So once the patient has been initiated on the treatment, now you have to see how the patient is doing, how is the follow-up for the patient, how is the patient doing on the drugs, is it controlled or it is partially controlled or it is uncontrolled. So to assess that, again we have to go back to the basic 4 questions, that daytime symptoms, limitations of activities, nocturnal symptoms, and relief of reliever medication. Lung functions and exacerbations are the things you can always ask about. What is important, these symptoms has to be addressed over a period of 28 days. So if a patient is already on treatment, and if you have to assess for the how well he is doing on the drugs, you have to ask these basic 4 questions, which should be extrapolated for number of 28 days. So if you have a patient who is on medication and who has daytime symptoms or any limitation of activities or any nocturnal symptoms or any use of reliever medication apart from the control medication he has been put on, if any one of these are present for last 28 days, then the patient is partially controlled, as you can see in the graph. And if none of this, if the answer to all this question is no, then patient is well controlled, and we can think of either curtailing the medication or decreasing the dose or even wean off the dose. And if all 3 or if all 4 or more than 3 features are present, then the patient has uncontrolled asthma. So we need to have to recheck your medication, then you have to look for the certain comorbidities, and then you have to ask about the patient's adherence to drugs, and most importantly, which we physician forget to ask patients or forget to understand, that the technique of inhalation is very important for the patients. They might not be properly inhaling the drugs, and the proper dose of drugs might not be reaching them. So that is again one of the very important considerations. The patient has come, if there is a patient is on medication and there is no control, or if it's partly controlled. So once the patient has been put on a control therapy, so we can step down treatment when asthma is well controlled, and the modality for such patient, how do you approach such patients, is like when the patient is well controlled on medium or high dose inhaled corticosteroid, you can reduce the dose by 50% at 3 months interval. Or maybe when you're using twice daily dose, you can push the patient into single dose. Or when controlled on a low dose inhaled corticosteroid, switch to once daily dosing. So basically, asthma, once very important to understand, we haven't talked about the exacerbation of asthma. We'll talk in the next class when we take up COPD as well. We'll talk about what is acute exacerbation of asthma. So over here the key message is asthma is a very common disease and it can start at any age, very common. It's basically a childhood disease, and you have a genetic predisposition and environmental risks and triggers. And very importantly, you should know about asthma that it can be effectively controlled, it can be properly managed, and once you come to your clinics, you will come to know about so many things. There is something called asthma action plan, and that basically addresses the patient's education, objective measures of lung function, patient's socioeconomic condition, and it addresses all these things which is related to the patient, all these attributes which are related to the patients, and definitely pharmacologically comes later on. One is very important thing is we also have to address a patient's apprehension, and for that counseling for the patient is very important. Counseling in the sense, if a parents come with a child and who's having the symptom of asthma, so one of the very common question that comes to their mind is whether the asthma is, whether this disease is curable or not, or whether there is a stigma about using inhalation therapy. So these all questions and apprehension has to be addressed. That is the only way you can encourage drug adherence, the patient's adherence to the drugs. That's how you can encourage patient adherence to the drug. If you don't address their apprehensions and their queries. So and you have to be very gentle, you have to be very kind while trying to counsel the patient. You should tell them that the patient, it is something like hypertension or diabetes, which 50% of the children go into remission, and they might not even have any further attacks of asthma later in their life. But the other 50%, they might have repeated attacks of asthma. That you have to, that particular sentiments you have to drive across every parents or every patients, and they have to tell them it is something analog to hypertension and diabetes. But one important thing about it is very well controlled, and the patient can lead a normal life if he adhere to the drug therapy and if he adhere to the advised therapy. The another important thing is you should tell them that the stigma related to inhalational drugs, you should always tell them that inhalational dose is always very less, very minute as compared to the oral, or they have many syrup formulations. So it is a very safest and very effective way of controlling this disease. So all in all, the aim is to accomplish the goals of therapy with the least possible medications and with the least mental and physical agony to the patient. So again, one of the things I would like to address while managing partly or uncontrolled asthma, you should always check the inhaler technique. You should always check the patient's adherence and understanding of medication, and you should obviously consider the aggravation by exposure to triggers and allergens at home, and the medications like beta blocker, NSAIDs, and aspirins. So I will. So now I will take on your questions. I'll just like to know your queries.